Oh, we are live. I'm just checking out this stream of where people are coming in from, and I'm seeing Linda's here, Rick's here. We got somebody from Daniel Miller from Buffalo, Wyoming. That can't be the Daniel Miller from LA that's in Buffalo, Wyoming. That would be too much of a coincidence because I just emailed the Daniel Miller who's in LA. But Buffalo, Wyoming. Hey, I'm a Wyoming kid, so that's good. Houston, Texas, the most civic activity of any city in the country and the most diverse city in the United States is Houston, Texas, believe it or not. Oh, Jim's coming. We got New Mexico here, Toronto, Spain, Wales, Illinois, Dorset, Boulder, Liverpool, Poway. No way. I can remember driving through Poway, Poland. All right, I'm just going to give this a minute or two here before we get started. We are going to talk today about design, which is it's a language, people. It's a full-on language that is built of many different dialects, and you kind of have to know a little bit about each of the dialects. But guess what? You know why I am the perfect person to give this talk? It is called Design 101, by the way. I'm the perfect person because in the grand total of my 56 years, I've had one class on design, and that was in 1991, where I had to design a book cover for Last of the Mohicans with tracing paper and a T-square. It was the semester before computers came to the University of Texas at Austin. I was one semester too early, so I had to do everything with a T-square and tracing paper. I have to say, I think my cover, 5-star. Totally 5-star. But let's, first of all, thanks to everybody who's tuning in here. We really appreciate you taking your time to be with us. This is going to be recorded and go on the YouTube channel. So if you can't be here, don't worry. You can check it out later. Also want to thank my colleagues behind the scenes. We have Michelle and we have Kara and Aaron. Without them, I would not be here in front of you because they're running all the tech on the back end. So thanks to them for being a part of this. And I'm going to do a couple of things here. The first thing I'm going to do is run through a presentation that's going to talk about the things that I'm then going to show in the software, because I think it's probably good. Some of you may want to just like write these down as we go. These are some of the basic design things that I see coming up again and again and again with people who are new to bookmaking, and sometimes with people who have been bookmaking for a long time but have gotten into a rut for one reason or another. So just going to take a look here. So Daniel says he's getting a huge echo. Audio's fine for everyone else. So Daniel, maybe you want to put a headset on. That might, some earbuds, earpod, maybe close other programs that you have open. That might be helpful. So I'm going to share my screen, and I am going to I'm going to share a window. We're going to do this one at a time. And I am going to go to full screen, and hopefully you guys can see this. If you can't, we're in big trouble. So I'm going to go here. Here we are. Hang on one sec. Let me go here and just share that one more time. I got a weird screen. Hopefully everyone can still see that. When I'm on this full screen thing, I cannot see the interface. But here we are. That's me. I'm Dan Milnor, by the way, Blurb's creative ambassador. If you don't know who I am, it looks like most of the people on this call already know. Let's talk about some basics of book design. The first thing we're talking about is front matter. And front matter is basically materials that come at the front of the book that provide context, and also, in my terms, allow the front of the book to breathe. For example, a lot of books I see coming through Blurb, especially from early or first-time bookmakers, is you open that book and on the first page, photograph. Second page, photograph. Third page, photograph. The book just starts immediately with all these photographs. If you went to a bookstore and you pulled off some traditionally published photo books and you opened it up and looked at them, that's typically not the way it works. So the front matter of a book can contain things like a title page, a copyright page, could have a dedication. You don't need all of these things, but these are things that typically fall under the front matter title. Acknowledgements, that's a favorite of mine. Table of contents, depending on the style of book that you're doing. This may work, may not. You may not need it. Introduction is always a good thing because remember, people are buying you. They're not just buying your book. They're interested in your story. And also a foreword. Typically, if you look at most traditionally published photo books, and in the situations where I was approached to do these books, one of the things that the publisher wanted me to do was to find some famous person to write the foreword. These are the basic things of front matter. At the same time, at the back of the book, you also want to let the back of the book breathe a little bit. And also remember that a lot of people are right-handed. So the book goes in their left hand and they open your precious book from the back, which means the back of the book has to work as it's sort of an introduction as well. So some of the things that can be in the back of the book could be acknowledgements. You could put them in the front, put them in the back, but acknowledgements are typically part of the back matter. You could put an appendix as if this is the kind of book that you think you need to make. You could also have a glossary if you're doing a project on something that might be slightly obscure, where there's some terminology that the average person might not know. You might need a glossary. You could have a bibliography if you're referencing other materials in the book itself. And an author bio. I think this is really important. And I don't know if you guys remember, they're still doing it, but it was, I think, even more pronounced back in the day. But the National Geographic used to have something called, there was one page in every issue called On Assignment, which was basically an author, one of the contributors to the episode, to the issue, would have their bio on that page. And there was always a photograph of them working in the field. And as a young photographer, that was my favorite page in the whole magazine. So I'm a big fan of the author bio. And you could also do an afterword. So that's, again, front matter, back matter. These are two of the things we're going to show in a minute. Sorry, let me go through this. The next is borders. What kind of borders do you put on an image? Do you necessarily run an image all the way across the page? Do you run it off the edge of all pages? Do you run images small? Do you run them large? And also, what about consistency of borders? That's really what I want to talk about when we talk about borders. And when I show you borders in a minute, is consistency. It's when you turn the page of the book, the borders that you saw on page 6 look very similar to the borders that you're going to see on page 16. There's not a wild diversity of border size on images. Image size is something else we're going to talk about. Again, this is all part of the basic design 101. All of these things are kind of the starting point when you sit down and start to do your magazine. She said my slides are not changing. So I just got a text message. Maybe, so what if, let me go here and hit play. Hang on, guys. Okay, hang on. So apparently the slides were not changing. So we are going, what if I do, let me try this. What if, can you see these slides changing now? Can you see these slides now? What about now? Can you see this title page, copyright page? You see slides changing. You should be able to see this. This is the one window that is being shown. Anyone? Anyone? Still on borders, still seeing the border slide. All right, so let me try this. Yeah, you should see Keynote. That's what we're doing. I'm going to stop sharing. All right, so for some reason, we ran the test twice before and this was working fine. It's not working now for whatever reason, so we're going to do this. Let me try this again. Let me go back to present. I'm going to share my entire screen. And we're going to see if you can see this. Is this working now? You should be able to, let's see here, view, full screen. How about this? Anything. Okay. Okay, so apparently the slides are no longer working. I'm not using two screens. We ran through this twice before we started and it worked perfectly. So Not entirely sure why this wouldn't be working. I'm going to do, yeah, you can see the basics now. But if I do this, we'll see. All right, let's do this. Let's go to, I'm going to go away from this, and I'm going to quit this, and I'm going to go to BookWright. All right, so I'm going to do this. Murphy's Law. Yes, right. All right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go here, present, share screen, window, BookWright, share. Now, you should be able to see BookWright. Can you see BookWright? I think there's a really strange delay that looks like it's very slow to show what I'm showing. Can you see BookWright? Okay. All right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to skip the presentation. All right, cool. Now we're cooking with gas. For whatever reason, the third time we showed Keynote, it didn't work. So we're going to skip Keynote and we're going to go straight to, I'm going to start back at the top of the list and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. Sound good? Bueno. Okay. So what I was talking about was front matter. And a lot of the things in front matter, title pages, copyright pages, etc. Let me show you how that translates. So let's say I'm looking here at, this is Blurb BookWright. I've got some pictures from Antarctica up here on the timeline. One of the things that I see all the time with people doing books is I see books like this, right? Let me just drag some images in here and get these things. And you get books where front cover is blank. We haven't talked about it yet, inside front cover, but you open the book itself and there's photograph, 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 photograph. There's nothing in here that gives me any kind of context to what the beginning of this book should be. So for example, let's say that we start on the cover here and I'm going to place a photo here on the cover. So let's just go up here. I'm going to place this photo here. Looks like there's some sound issues as well. Boy, it's amazing. This is normally this platform works really well, but again, it is tech, so you never know. Some people are saying their audio is fine and other people are saying it's not. So we're obviously having some tech issues, but let's say that I do this cover and I'm going to place some text on here as well, just for fun. We are going to talk about covers in a minute, but let's say I want this to be, let's say it's let's say I'm going to do all caps, the land of ice and snow. And I'm going to select this and I'm going to, let's say I move it over to the left side. And then maybe we go like, I don't know, we go like this. And then maybe we add a little depth to it. So you get the idea. I'm moving this around here. We kind of have this, right? So I have the cover of the book and then the title of the book. If I'm a good piece of front matter, instead of immediately landing on a bunch of images in the front of the book, I basically say, how do I want to give the book a chance to breathe? And that is where the front matter comes in. So I'm going to erase the stuff that I did here. Instead of landing on page 1 with an image and just saying image, 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 image as I go, I'm going to go back here and I'm going to copy this text container and I'm going to go down to that first page and I'm going to paste it in. I'm going to turn instead of having white text, I'm going to have black. And now I've got a title page. So as you turn this over, and again, it's actually running off a little bit, but I actually kind of like the fact it's running off a little bit. I might actually use that at some point. But now I have, instead of hitting me with a photo on the first page of the book, the front matter is giving me a title page. As we move further down, I could say, well, okay, so I have a title page there, but people, they might see that cover image and think, oh, I know exactly what this story is, but maybe the story is something peculiar, it's something different, and they don't quite know. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to add a little text and I'm going to make this much smaller and I'm going to add a bunch more of it in here. And I'm doing a little kind of, like an introduction here. So I have a little body of copy, and then I could put a title here, and it could say introduction. I'm going to make that a little bigger. Let's say 18 point. And now I have, as we go back to the beginning of the book, go to the cover and you hit preview, and you've got your book cover, and then you've got a inside cover, which I haven't designed yet. But now the front matter is allowing you to sort of slowly make your way in. And it's also giving the reader a lot of information, the land of ice and snow, then onto an introduction. And then maybe you decide to start hitting them with photographs. That's the power of front matter. And the same exact thing applies for back matter. I don't need to walk you through the design of back matter because it's very similar to what I'm doing here. Again, you could have the author bio in the back. You could have an acknowledgments in the back. What I'm saying is you don't want abrupt beginnings and abrupt endings, because that's not really how illustrated books are done. You want to emphasize front matter and back matter. So now let's talk a little bit about borders. So let's say that I'm down here on this spread and I want to place a photo. I'm going to go to layouts. I'm going to go to one photo layouts. And I have two options. I can do, well, I have more than two options, but I'm going to use these two options. I have a page with a border, and let me look for a vertical image here that'll fit a little better. Let me say this is the inside of the ship. And if I go to preview, you will see this image is a four-way bleed, which means the image runs off the edge of the page all the way around. And this image has a white border on it. Now, this is, again, personal preference. I am a border guy. I really like to have a little bit of border around the edge of the image. I think it's a nice separation from the edge of the page. It's not to say that I don't do bleeds from time to time. I do. But I really prefer the borders. The point I want to make is when you choose what kind of border you want to make, it's a really good idea to stick with it throughout the book. You don't want to constantly be mixing up small border, large border, one-way bleed, two-way bleed, four-way bleed, because the reader, it's disjointed for the reader. And that is something you want to try to keep consistency. So that's the borders. Okay, here's where we get a little interesting, and this is always fun. This is about image size and the fact that bigger is not always better. So let me do this. Let me turn this into a horizontal here. So sometimes we all think, well, if I'm a photographer, so I need to make sure I have the absolute largest possible image I can get on a page. So image size, this looks fine. This is a perfect image to run across both pages. And, I'm not losing anything in the gutter. This is a perfect place over here. If I wanted to put in some type, I could definitely put type here and make it white, and it would stand out perfectly and be great. But also, what happens when you take an image and you make it much smaller? It doesn't necessarily reduce the power of the image. And in some cases, it actually, in my opinion, increases the power of the image. So you don't necessarily always have to run images at the maximum size, where something small can actually take the power that's in that photograph and contain it, compress it in a way. And the second thing is, think about this. Think about the physicality of consuming someone's book. The smaller the image is, and I'm not saying that you make a book full of tiny images, although I think there is something to be said for that, but smaller images force you to become more intimate with the book itself. So I'll give you an example. I went to Paris Photo, which is a big show in Paris every year in November. And I remember this was many years ago. This was when print technology became affordable enough to where people could take regular 35 millimeter images and they could make them wall size prints, right? Bigger. If you, the running joke is, if you can't make it good, make it big. And if you can't make it big, make it in color. That's the running joke in the art world. So when this technology came along, all of a sudden, everyone was making their photographs massive prints. But you know what the biggest crowd by far at Paris Photo was? And I'm talking a crowd. It was like the Mona Lisa, where you had to wait in line to get to see a photograph. The largest crowd at the entire place was an 8x10 black and white Henri Cartier-Bresson print. It was 8 by 10. It meant that you had to physically get close to it. The same thing applies when you're looking at photographs in a book. If it's small, you have to physically bring the book closer, and that's a really good thing. So when I talk about image size, play around. And everything that we're talking about here, all of the sort of suggestions and talking about front matter and back matter and borders, there are exceptions to all these rules. And by the way, the best news is you can break the rules on all of these different things. That's the thing. But try to stay consistent. Okay, this is something I get all the time, which is, can you mix color and black and white? And the short answer is yes. And I'm going to do this. This is not quite a black and white image, but it's close enough. I'm going to draw a little image container here, and I'm going to drag this sucker down. Oh, ignore the color on the side. There we go. Now we've got a basic black and white image, and we've got a color image over here. There's no reason why you can't do this. I think this is, well, with the advent of digital cameras where you can so easily go between color and black and white, it's a pretty simple, explanation as to why people are doing this so much now. Back in the film days, remember how hard it was if you had a half a roll of black and white film in your camera and you said, oh, geez, I really want to shoot color now. Well, that meant you had to roll out the black and white film. It was much more difficult. Now we can do this all the time. But I'll tell you something. I have about 400 traditionally published books in my house that are monographs. So really well done, professionally printed books from professional photographers. I've been collecting these since I was in college. If there are 6 books out of those 400 that mix color and black and white, I would be surprised. That's typically not what happens. And here's why. It's a visual complexity that can often confuse the viewer or the reader because they may or may not be photographers. And they may be looking and saying, wait a minute, the last 4 pages I looked at were color. And now all of a sudden you're showing me black and white. Wait a minute, is this a black and white book? And then they turn the page and there's another color picture. And they're like, I don't really know what's going on. And the reason why I think this is so tricky is anytime any of us make a book that we're putting out into public that we're hoping that other people look at, we kind of have to do everything in our power to make sure that we're assisting them as much as possible in that process. And I know that sounds crazy. It sounds like we're babysitting, but we kind of are. That's where we're at now. So when I look at a spread like this, if this was a solid black and white image, it just is something, it's a little bit too much complexity that I don't necessarily want. My advice to you would be to do, for example, this is work from Antarctica, and I have a whole separate section of work that's black and white. There's absolutely no reason why I cannot do a black and white magazine and a color magazine. They're the same size. I could choose the same page count. Let's say that I did a 40-page or 60-page black and white magazine and a 60-page color magazine, and then they work together as companion pieces. To me, that's the interesting way to do it. It's not trying to jam everything into one. I think there's better ways of going about it. Okay. This next one is a doozy, but let me check here to make sure in the chat. How's everybody doing? How's everyone doing post-technical problems? These are not the first technical problems I've had today, and my guess is, for those of you who know me, it's probably not my last technical problems, but how's everyone doing? Does anyone have a favorite thing so far? Was it front matter or back matter, or was it borders, or are you now telling yourself not to mix color and black and white? Okay, Paul's good. Everybody's good. We're going to get to the questions in a second. I'm going to keep going here because the next one is a doozy. The next one is about typefaces, type. And if I create a text box here, I'll show you what I'm doing. Click in here. Look at all these different typefaces. So type is an art form. It is a language in itself. Like I said to you, my training in typography was 0. I didn't have any training in typography. When I used to make books, I would basically start to write. Let's say that I would go in here and I'd write something like this. And I'm going to go here to 0. And I'm going to change this typeface to make it a little easier to read. Let's say that I did this. When I used to make books, I would write something, and whatever the first font was in the drop-down menu, a Brill fat face, that's the type I would use. And frankly, it's really not good enough. Their type is such a beautiful thing, and you have so many choices. So one of the things that I recommend with type is to find something that has a feel that fits the work itself. For example, a couple of years ago, I taught a workshop in Albania, and one of the students did a deep dive on typography, and he found typefaces that were Albanian typefaces. And it turns out that the typefaces that he found, they looked like all the typefaces that were on the gas stations in the stores in Albania. So it had a real connection to place. The second thing I want to talk about here is I'm going to go up here and delete this. And I'm going to change this to a different typeface that's a little easier to read. So let's go down here and we'll take like Futura. That's an easy one to read. Right now, this is at 18-point typeface. And the default is 12. And 12 is pretty big. It might not look like it's big because you got to zoom in to see it, but it's pretty big. And I think one of the things I see is typeface type that is too large. So choosing the right typeface, choosing the right size is the second part of the equation. And then the fun part of the equation too is what density are you going to use? So let me make this a little bigger so everyone can see it. But if we went to 24 point, one of the things I see is type that is too large. Okay, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go down here and I'm going to paste it in. I'm going to do this. And now look what happens when I go to here and I go to the color checker and I turn this into a gray font. Look at the difference between those two deliveries. And then there's no reason why you cannot do this on the same page. That's one of the ways that you separate things for titles, paragraph heads, knockout quotes, the things where you can, so you're choosing a typeface that's specific to your project, that has meaning to it in some way, shape, or form. Then you're choosing the correct size of the typeface. And then you're also saying, okay, well, I can also play with color and I can play with density. That is sort of the beginnings, the design 101 rumblings of how you start to work with type. My advice is that I wouldn't use on any publication, I would try to keep it to 2 typefaces total, at the very most 3. But here's the last thing I'm going to say about type, which I think is really fun because it deals with your brain. There is something called type hierarchy. And that means it's when the brain sees this type right here. Let's say that this was a caption. Okay, so let's say that I said, okay, the caption of this is one of the things I see is type that is too large. When the human brain sees this typeface at this size in this color, it says, oh, every time I see this combination of ingredients, it means caption. So every time you turn a page, the brain sees the type and says, oh, that means that I'm seeing a caption. If I have this that's gray, and let's say that it's only 10 point, and this is, I don't know, let's say this is a photo caption. Now the same thing applies. When the brain sees this little tiny piece of gray, the brain says, every time I see 10-point gray font, that's a photo caption. That's called visual hierarchy and type hierarchy. And the same thing applies to your photographs. So this is something that the brain does naturally, and it's something that can really help you with type when it comes to designing whatever it is that you're designing. I absolutely love type. I don't know that much about it. I feel like a novice, even though I've been bouncing around and studying type and traveling with people who are type specialists who've been really helpful in trying to help me get up to speed on how to do these things better. Type is such a beautiful part of your book. And by the way, even if you're a photographer, a hardcore photographer, and you're making a portfolio, so a portfolio may have a little bit less copy than, say, a book that you're writing that has a story to it. Even the type that's in your portfolio is so fun, but also so critical to how the overall piece feels. So if you don't know much about type, don't feel bad about it. This is a lifelong thing. There are so many great type resources out there for you to dive in. It's a blast. Okay, columns. This also ties directly into type. Okay, so let me go to a different spread here. This is one of the things that I see most that does not work right. So let me draw a text box here, and let me start writing in here. I'm going to go back to right justified or left justified. Okay, let me go here, and I'm going to copy this, and I'm just going to paste it so I can fill this in here. Okay, so let's say, I'm going to go back here. Let me do this line. Let me go back to 1.0, go here. Okay. I'm just going to fill this type box in with, so let me just do this so it looks like I've got a row of text here. I see this quite a lot. I see a lot of books that have a row of copy like this across the page. This is not most of the books that you're going to see published by traditional publishers. This is not really how it works. This is very hard to read. There's a lot of length to these pages. And again, when I started making photography books, all my text looked like this. And then someone came to me and said, do you have any photo books on your shelf that use text like that? And when I started looking, I was like, no, actually, I don't. And so what happens is this is very hard to read. And as you can see, let's see, this is where the gutter is. This is where the fold is. If your type runs all the way over to here, it's going to be very hard to read unless you crush that book open to see it. So when I go to layouts and I go up here and I go down to text, I can do something like this, where let me do this, copy, go in here, go here, and I can go here. Look at the difference between those two pages. This to me is much more professional. It's also much easier to read. And also you can do really fun things like stack. They don't necessarily have to be aligned. You could stack some slightly off. You could then go underneath. You could put a photograph in here if you so choose to do it. And you're starting to build slightly different style of pages. But the real test here, in the real sort of suggestion, is think about columns as opposed to one massive body of copy. Again, so much easier to read, so much more professional looking, and really easy. And it's fun. And of course, you can go in here and do paragraph breaks and a lot of other things. But the columns, the main point is that I wanted to make is just basically don't forget to consider using columns. Looks way better than that. I'm just gonna preview this again for my own sake. By the way, if anyone can decipher this, I'll give you, I have no prizes to give out, but I'm just happy we're past our technical problems. I mean, who isn't? Okay. Covers. I'm going to go back up to my cover here. Now, this is my suggestion about covers. There's maybe 512 cliches that I could drop right now about covers, and they're all true. So the cover is obviously very important. And in my experience at Blurb, I've seen a lot of people, some familiar with bookmaking and others not, open up the software. And obviously the first thing you're going to see up here in the upper left is the front and back cover. And because the cover is so important, we sometimes get a little disturbed by how important it is. And we can start to fixate on the cover and then never get to the rest of the book because we can't quite make this the way that we want. So here's what I do. I do a quick mock-up like this, and then I move. This is clearly not perfect. I've got the word land here. It's running over the top of this penguin's head. This is maybe a little bit too close. Maybe I don't want to use white. Maybe the legibility is going to be better if I use black, although that's a story in itself. Or I could just go over here and say, okay, well, maybe I can, I'm going to move this over here. Maybe if I move this photo over a little and then I move this back, okay, that's looking a little better. I got a little more space there. So let me go here. That's looking a little better. The Land of Ice and Snow. I don't mind that. There's no author name. I would probably need to add my name here, or I could do something. The point is cover design, simple, clean, good use of typography. I don't like covers with a bunch of images on them. I think a simple, clean cover like this. And once you've got a basic cover in place, leave it alone until you're done with the rest of the book. So here I've got a decent looking cover. I say to myself, okay, I made some progress. There's a lot about this I like. I'm going to leave it. I'm going to go on. I'm going to start designing the inside of my covers. I'm going to start working on my front matter so that I've got the title page here. I could do a half title page that had the title again with my author name. I've got an introduction, and now I'm going to start with, I'm going to do this because everybody on this call loves photography, right? I'm going to go here and I'm going to go, let's see here. What image do we want? Let's do something. Did I make any good photographs? That is the question that we all need to answer. Okay, I'll do this one. Orcas. Who doesn't like orcas? That's pretty simple, right? So I got my cover a little bit the way I wanted, and I said, okay, now I can start moving in. I've got my title page. I've got my introduction, and boom, then I hit them with my photographs. That's how the beginning of the book should feel. Now, based on what I said earlier about borders, this is a four-way bleed. The image is going all the way off the page. It looks great. I have absolutely nothing against this, but what happens, because you know me, I'm kind of a border guy. So what if I just do this? What if I go up here? Whoops, I didn't mean to move it. I just want to do this. What if I do this? And now we have a look. See, I like that border. I like the containment of the image, a personal preference, but I think I'm sticking with this. So the covers, again, clean, simple. Look at the National Geographic. The National Geographic magazine, which is so many people's favorite photography publication for decades and decades and decades. And I assisted for photographers who work for National Geographic. The cover images were always simple, easy read. And so that to me is this is not in Kansas. The cover image is simple. Who doesn't love a penguin? I defy someone on this call to go in the chat and tell me you don't like penguins. It's impossible to not like penguins. It's simple. It's easy to read. The title is easy to read. That's what a good cover does. I've seen some covers, too busy, not the right typeface, or, templates where the type is automatically placed in a position that's not advantageous for the photograph. Again, practice. This is so much fun. This is the ultimate puzzle pieces of you taking your photography and making it so much more profound through this process. And again, if I can do it, you can do it. Okay. Number of images. This is kind of, I'm going to go back to the spread and I'm going to delete this and start over. I don't like this spread at all. At all. There's nothing about this spread I like, and it's my own spread. So I have no one to blame but myself. Okay. This is about the number of images on a page. So let's say we have this. I'm going to move this over. I got this penguin. He's flying up onto the ice. Now, I'm going to make this a little smaller because, again, did I tell you how much I like borders? I like borders. Okay. So what do you have to look at on this spread? It's a trick question. You have one thing to look at. This photograph of the penguin. Now, white space is not empty. White space is a thing. It's an object. White space is the same thing as this photograph. It in itself is an object. So keep that in mind. But now look what happens if I go back to layouts and I go here and I go up to photos and I do this one. Now, what do you have to look at? Now, I just ask you to do twice as much. I just ask you to look here and I ask you to look here. That's a lot. I just took 50% of the attention away from this photo because of this photo. Now, what if, let me go up to layouts and let me go to 4 photo layouts. Good grief. And let me go to photos. Let me do this. I see a lot of Blurb books that look like this. This to me is a big no-no. This is no. Right now, my brain is exploding. My eye has nowhere to look. I have no idea what's going on. And I'm kind of confused about life in general after looking at this spread. This is too many photographs on a spread. It's just way too hard for the viewer to take in anything. The eye does not know where to travel. So again, one of the things I love about photo books or books in general is that it plays on the makeup of the brain. We talked a little bit about this earlier with type hierarchy. The same thing applies for brightness. And also the human brain is trained to look right here first every time it turns a page. That's the first place the brain is trained to look. The second place it's trained to look is the brightest part of the spread. So that would be right here. Okay, is this the most important part of the spread? No, it's not. But if their eye goes here first and then to here, just imagine what all the confusion that this causes over here. So it's really too much. So when I talk about number of images on a page, this is kind of where we're at. This is not the thing that you want to do. Basically, I'm going to get rid of these because they're making me a bit ill, making me ill. And I'm going to say, all right, well, what about this? Let me just do this. Let's think about fewer photographs, but let's think about letting those photographs breathe. Now, this is maybe not the perfect example. I'd have to maybe go over here to get the crop right or go over here. I could probably choose a better photograph for this. Let me go back to the beginning. Let me go, let's see here. Where are those people? There it is. Let's do this one. I could do this, put this in the middle. This is a much, much, much simpler, easier spread to read. So my suggestion to you when it comes to number of images is fewer photographs, but allow them to breathe. Give them more space. Again, remember earlier when I said we have to give as much assistance as possible to the viewer? This is giving them assistance. When they turn this page, all they have to see is this one photograph. I think it's a decent photograph. It's not great, but it gives a sense of scale. There's also a long lens that's compressing, makes it look like the ice is closer than it really is. It's a simple read photograph, the orange against the blue. There's some decent aspects of this image, but simple, clean, not a spread with 500 images. Okay, we are now going to talk about, and this is interesting because this came from a longtime friend who asked me to talk about running vertical and horizontal images. So that's tricky. We all shoot verticals. We all shoot horizontals. Sometimes in a lot of books, you will see either or. Those are more rare. And when you do see a book that's all one aspect ratio, or landscape or portrait, typically those are landscape photographs. It's rare to see a book that has nothing but vertical photographs. In fact, a lot of photographers don't shoot verticals at all. I happen to shoot a lot of verticals. I always have, and I have no idea why. So it's a little trickier. It adds to the complexity, but look at this. So instead of saying, okay, I'm going to take this and I'm going to make this, all right, let me start over here. Let me create a photo and I'm going to do a landscape. Let me do this. And then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say, well, I have a vertical and I need to run a vertical picture and it's going to be this. Whoops. Let me go here and say into this. Oh, that was a text box I made by accident. Let me go here, go up to I placed a text box instead of a photo box. I want a photo box. Now, this is how most people say, well, I have horizontal images and I have vertical images, and this is how I'm going to solve it. But again, look at the differentiation in the borders, the size of the borders. I could reduce this file so it's closer in size to this one. I could even make it the same size as that one. That's not bad. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But think about this. Think about, well, what if I did something like this? I'm going to move this for now over here. What if I did something like this? This crop's going to be awkward, but I'm just going to make my point with this. What about do this, go here. Now I've got something that looks a little more interesting. Now this image I would flip because it's going the wrong way. So I would flip this way. So they're walking into the page and not off the page. But you see what I'm saying here is you've got a little bit more sophistication to the layout. You're using horizontal and vertical, but they're working together as a pair. And you could also say, well, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to put a little, I'm going to do a little text box. Actually, I don't even need it that wide. I'm going to go here and I'm going to put a little text in here, and I'm going to go up to 10 point and right side, and I'm going to copy and then paste it in there like this. So you got a little copy block down here on the bottom that you could, let me go, instead of white, it's going to be black. And we're going to go to 1, and I'm going to go just like that. I'll copy, paste, paste, paste. And now I've got a little bit of a spread. So I'm using, I would move this, I would put it over here perhaps, or here. All I'm saying is I'm using the vertical and the horizontal pictures together in a way that doesn't necessarily separate them onto different pages. They work together to combine on a single spread. I think that's one of the ways you can do this. The other thing you can do that's kind of fun is if you have a bunch of vertical images, let's say that you have 8 or 10 verticals, but the bulk of the book is horizontal. You can always use the verticals as chapter heads. So there, again, it's a consistency. So every time the reader flips the page, they see a vertical picture. They say, oh, every time I see a vertical, I know on the other page, there's going to be a chapter number. And there's going to be a paragraph of copy, so that every time I see a vertical, there's a new chapter. Consistency, consistency, consistency. That's the basic design 101. If I had to look at all the stuff that we've talked about today in terms of basic design 101, that's really it. It's about simplifying things, cleaning things up, and trying to keep consistent with the overall look and feel. I love front matter. I love back matter. And again, am I an expert at front matter? No. Am I an expert at building covers? No, but I actually kind of like this cover. There's things I would add to it, but it's clean and simple. And frankly, some of you might be thinking, well, you should make that type black so that it's easier to read. Think about what I said a minute ago. So let's say that it is easier to read in black, that white's a little harder to read. What might that force the viewer to do? What might, now you might lose them. They may say, I can't read this. It might actually make them slow down, hold the book a little bit closer to see what that title is. And that means I'm kind of winning in this whole conversation. So those are basic, those are 10 different pieces of small design that you can work on and practice on. I'm going to stop sharing and go back here to the main page. Those are 10 different aspects of design that you can work on that are pretty simple. Take an hour, work on front and back matter, then decide on your borders, the size of images, the number of images you want to have on the page. And typography is your best friend. Typography is going to be a shadow with you from here on out, because every single thing we do. And the fun part is when you start to dive into the world of type, it starts to take over every single thing you do. So even if I'm writing a note on my iPad, I'll select all and I'll go through the type menu looking for something interesting that feels like, if I'm writing to a letter to my friend Michael, I'll say, what typeface do I think best fits this letter? It's a really fun thing. Leslie said, I never would have thought to use white text on a light photo. Yes, that's the thing. One of my all-time favorite photo books is called Library of Dust. The designer's name is Bob Awfuldish. The photographer, I want to say, is David Maisel. The typeface is so small, it's almost impossible to read. That's a purposeful move. That is how that book is designed. And that took me a second to figure out why someone would do that. Books are a psychological game to get you to engage, to put your phone down and to give me 100% undivided attention. That's what I want from you when I put a book in front of you. That's hard. So all these little things can be helpful tricks to get you where you need to be, to get somebody to engage with it. So I love, I just mocked up a book that I want to do, a book that's half photographs, half writing. And I have a title, and I just mocked it up. One with a photograph of me on the cover, and one with a photograph of the Drake passage on the cover. And in the book that has a photograph of me, it's hard to read the title, but I actually like it more than the other version because it is harder to read. It kind of makes you slow down and focus. let's see here. Let's take a little, let's take some questions here. I'm going to look through the chat. Unless if a question pops up, I'll answer it. And otherwise, how can, Dan, can you please demonstrate how best to set consistent borders? What are your pink borders? What are the pink borders you're showing? Okay, so the easiest way to, the pink areas in the Blurb software are the print safe areas. That's showing you what you're going to lose in the gutter. And it's also going to show you the trim lines of where those images, where those pages are going to be trimmed. Those pink lines you can turn on and off. I prefer to leave them on because I think I want to see exactly where the edges of my images are, but I also want to see what I'm going to lose in the gutter. That's something I'm consistently saying to myself. Is it okay? Can I get away with that or no? Consistent borders is very easy. You can just use the same template every single time. So if I want a single image on a page, I can use that single image template. It's going to be the same every time. The second thing you can do in the software is you can design your own spread. So if I have a certain size image I want, I can design that, make that image box, and then I can just save that template and it will pop up in my templates and I can reuse it again and again and again. That's the easiest way to do consistent borders. How about another question? What do we got? What's next? Let's see. Oh, I think I just did this one. Will you talk about decisions regarding a book with mixed portrait and landscape orientation images and show how to handle this with consistent borders? That's what I just showed last, where I had a horizontal image and a vertical image. And instead of putting them on opposing pages at different sizes, the first thing you can do is, if you are going to use them on opposing pages, is to make those images the same size. But what I did was I took the horizontal across the border and then I used the vertical at the same height as the horizontal. So they worked as a spread, as a pair. And that's something I've been doing forever. Some people call that like editorial style, although newspapers will do the same thing. There's a lot of different print places that will do that. I've seen a lot of design books that do that. It's really about that. And again, you don't have to do every spread the same. The next spread could be just a horizontal image. Then you could have the next spread could be just a vertical image. It's really about just providing a consistency so the reader has a path to follow. What you don't necessarily want is for a reader to turn the page and just say, where's this going? Wait a minute. And then go back to the front and say like, okay, wait a minute. I thought this was a book of black and white photography and now it's color. And then there's like all different sizes and borders and shapes. It's a lot for somebody to take in. Oh, there's some really good questions in here. Again, can we place a big text with 2 columns in the middle of the book, or better to place it at the beginning? Maybe any text in the middle of the book can distract viewers from the photos. No, you can put it in the middle of the book. You can put text throughout. One of my favorite photo books is called The Descendants by a local New Mexican photographer named Norman Mauskopf, and a poet named Jimmy Santiago Baca wrote the poem, and the poem flows through the entire book. And it's really beautiful. And the type placement and the design of how that poem flows in and out of the photographs is really well done. So Rick, it's really about experimenting and testing and seeing what feels right. If you put an essay at the beginning, like an introduction, and you put an author bio at the end, those have a pretty high likelihood of being consumed based on where they're placed. But I love mixing things up with photographs. The thing is, I try not to make books for other photographers. I try to make books for the public. There's far more public than there are photographers. So if you're making books and your concern is really just other photographers seeing it, you can sort of get away with less because they may just be obsessed over the photographs. But the kind of books that I want to make, I want to take photography and I want to make it interesting to everyday people who aren't photographers. So mixing in a lot of text and story is important. Mixing in behind the scenes things is important because they're as interested in the story as they are photographs. Okay, we got time for a couple more here. This is fun. I like having time for questions at the end. There's so many questions I'll never get to, but I'm looking in the chat and they're very, very good questions. You can place photos near the top, center, or near the bottom of the page. Stay consistent or play with this. As I said earlier, I like consistency, but if you can tell me why you're breaking the rules and why you're doing something, I'm all in. So here's the thing. So a really famous book guy told me one time, he said, look, bookmaking has a ton of rules. and you can break all of them. But if I ask you why you broke a rule, you should have an answer. And what he meant was, if I said to you, Zach, hey, you did this and half of this image is running off the page. Why did you do that? And you go, I don't know. That's one answer. Or if you said, oh, I did that because I feel like this story is incomplete. And so I don't want you to see the whole photograph. I want to leave you wanting to see the rest of the photo that you can't see. That's an answer. That makes sense. That makes me go, okay, cool. I got it. I understand why you did that. That's what my friend meant by saying, hey, you can break any rule there is. Just make sure you have an explanation as to why you're doing it. So, okay, cool. So we can answer, keep going. We can answer more questions. This is good. Let's see here. How do you choose the spine art on your photo books? In the software template, there will be a little in the Blurb BookWright software on the spine. You'll see the place where you can drag images in there. You can put copy in there. The book that I was just talking about designing, the one that I want to do that's half photos and half, that's an actual 6x9 hardcover trade book, and it has a little space for me. And so I put the title in there, and that's where you would find that. A lot of times with my photo books, I won't put anything in the spine. Again, it's a personal preference. Sometimes people put the title, they put the author name. Sometimes they'll put an image in there or a solid color. It's just how it feels overall. There's no exact right or wrong reason to do that. How do you choose spine art on your photos? Thanks for the question, Tully. That's a good one. All right. Ooh, this is a trick question. This is from DZIEROTT. What paper do you prefer, glossy or matte? You're trying to trick me. I know what you're doing. It's not going to work. So which paper do I prefer, glossy, matte? Yes, all the above. So paper is a personal preference. And in a second, I'll tell you some of my favorite Blurb papers, but paper's a personal preference. But here's the thing. When I started making Blurb books, at that time in my life, hang on, I'm choking up. At that time in my life, I was shooting two things. I was shooting portraits and I was shooting documentary work. In my head, I said, oh, I know exactly what paper I'm going to use for my portraits, and I know exactly what paper I'm going to use for my documentary work. And I started making books, and I realized something very quickly. I was using the exact wrong paper for both of them. I needed to flip what I was doing. So for my portraiture, I used the Proline eggshell paper. It's an uncoated, little bit of a tooth to it. It's my favorite Blurb paper. And I would take those portrait images and I would open them up like a half stop. So the portraits looked light and bright and airy, and they weren't too saturated. There wasn't too much of anything. They were very muted kind of thing on that uncoated paper. And then the documentary work, I started printing on the coated paper, which was glossy, because it was more contrast, more color if I was shooting color. And it was darker, and it held more ink, and it just had that fit. But again, it was a personal preference. It took me a while to figure out exactly what I was going to use. I love standard color paper in trade books. That's what I would call the most diverse, most flexible, highest quality paper in the trade books, standard color. And then in magazine premium only, I love that paper. It's glossy, but it's not too glossy. And then with photo books, I love the Proline papers, which are the most expensive papers. But there's a coated one and an uncoated one, and they're both really good, but they're very, very different. And because I don't know what your work is, I can't really suggest like, oh, you should use this paper or that paper. If you don't want to spend a lot of money, just use this Blurb standard paper in the photo books. It's actually quite good. In fact, it's really good. And I know some really famous photographers who've made books with Blurb, and of all the papers we make, that's their favorite paper. So you don't have to spend a ton of money. You can use a standard paper. Here's another little trick that I love is spend money on paper and save money on cover. So I love 8x10, 7x7, soft cover photo books, but with a high-end paper. So a soft cover photo book, but with eggshell paper, Proline, that is a beautiful combo. And the other thing too is, even though the paper's more expensive, if you're using a thicker paper, you need fewer pages to make the book feel right. You know, you don't make a 20-page photo book and put a hardcover on it, because it feels like all cover and no book. The object itself is really important. How it looks, how it feels. You want a book to be thick enough. You want it, all the materials are such an integral part of the visceral experience of taking in a book. And that's true for novels as well. And why people buy hardbacks as opposed to paperbacks. But I love that combination of soft cover with a thicker paper, so that the book feels really good. If you put a soft cover on 40 pages of Proline paper, it feels like a beautiful object. All right, what's next? Mostly shoot in black and white. Does matte work the best for black and white? That's what I'm always leaning towards. Not necessarily. Matte is, again, black and white especially is such a personal preference, but I prefer the coated papers with black and white. But I'm not a tonal range guy. I'm not Ansel Adams. When I was in college, they tried to force me to be Ansel Adams, and that did not go well. That was not good. That was a square peg in a round hole. So I prefer coated paper because my black and white is contrasty, dark, and grainy. And the coated papers, the gloss papers or the slight gloss papers, tend to give me that look more than if I'm using a matte paper. But again, if I had to guess, I would say photographers are split 50-50 on who likes what. And the same was true back in the darkroom era. Some of us printed on coated papers, and some people printed on fiber-based papers, and some people did warm tone prints, and some people did cold tone prints. Again, it's a personal preference. And also it will change project by project. All right. What other question we got here? I'm looking for, what else we got? Would you choose? Oh, Kristen, would you also choose a specific, I think you meant to say lens through a project to make it consistent? How did you know I was lazy? That's what I want to know. But I'm a big fan of the one lens thing. To me right now, the lens I use most is a 40 mil on a Nikon camera. I love, I've gone through phases in my career. When I started in the newspaper world, that was not possible. You had to kind of everyone was using zoom lenses at the time. There was a 20-35 and a 70-200. That was kind of the newspaper setup, because there were a lot of times as a newspaper photographer, you couldn't physically move your body. You would get stuck and you'd be in one place, shooting a football game or a crime scene or something. You couldn't move. So the zooms were important. I don't do that kind of work anymore. So I do my own kind of like personal documentary work, and the 40 mil I love. And it is what I love is to eliminate decision-making when you're making pictures, because making pictures is hard enough, especially if you are trying to, you're shooting real events. You're shooting unscripted events. You want to simplify as much as possible of the process so that you can react specifically to what's in front of you. So I am a big fan of using less equipment, fewer lenses to keep things simple. I also think it does help with consistency of look in a book, especially if you're shooting like a book of portraits. 40 millimeter lens portraits, vertical, every spread image on the right-hand side, maybe some copy on the other side, those kind of things where it makes it really simple. It makes it easier for you to go from editing to print. So whatever helps you do that is high on my list of to-dos. Okay, here. Yes, in BookWright, you can, Chris writes, in BookWright, can you import an RTF file? Or you can import an RTF file. How do you move those pages once you import? So Chris, the easiest thing for you to do is go to the Blurb YouTube channel, and there are some how-to films. And one of those how-to films is about RTF files and reflowable text containers. It's a little bit much for me to try to explain, because it's a little 2 or 3 step process. It's not complicated. Once you do it once, it'll be locked in, but it shows you how to basically copy what's on that RTF file, create a column of text, paste the RTF file, and at the bottom, there'll be another little box that basically says, you know, do you want this text to continue into the next columns? And boom, it just takes that text and moves it into those columns. And then you can reposition and resize the way you want. So that's the slickest thing to do. But yes, RTF file is the way to import text into Blurb. Sometimes though, I'll write in Microsoft Word, I'll copy and paste into the Blurb software. That works as well. And again, it's sort of a personal preference of what path you want to take. I probably do the copy paste from Word more than I do RTF, but only because I'm in Word all day, every day anyway, and I'm writing stuff all the time. So it's just it's a habit that I've gotten into, a pattern that I've gotten into. Let's see. Okay. Johannes or Johans, my question is, I already print several books with Blurb, 3 of them that I would love to consolidate all 3 in one thick book. That's interesting. Okay. You could do that. I was going to say there's a way to do 2 books that would be really crazy, really weird, but 3 books, what you could do is you could color code. Each book would have its own, let's say there's an orange and a black and a blue. And so maybe the chapter heads that are the beginning of each of the new series of books, you could color code. If you're trying to take all the work that's in all 3, and it's all different kinds of work, and put it into one book, the first thing I would say is to just slow down and realize how complicated and time consuming that might be. It is kind of a fun challenge to do that. I think I kind of look at something like that. You'll hear this term sometimes, a mid-career retrospective. So let's say that there's a famous photographer and this person has whatever, 6 books, and they get to be whatever, 55 years old, and they've had all this success and acclaim. And then someone says, you know what we should do? We should do a mid-career retrospective. And some editor is assigned the assignment of taking those 6 books and figuring out how they're related and how they would all fit into one. That is kind of a masterclass in editing and design. It's challenging. I think it would be really fun to try. And here's a good message for everyone that's on this call. Taking these basic design tools, editing your work, sequencing your work, taking the basic design and starting to lay out a book is simply going to make you a better photographer, because it is going to show you what you have and don't have. And it's going to force you to apply thought to your work in a way that's different from what you would do in the digital space. That is really one of the most important things. Even if you never hit print, which I'm not saying you should do, but even if you didn't, even if you spent all this time and you couldn't quite get that book the way you wanted, the process of going through that to try to determine that much about your work is really important. That's how you get a better understanding of who you are, and you get a better understanding of what you're good at and what you're not so good at. And it also really comes into play when someone, a stranger, or even someone who's in a position of power in photography asks you that fateful question. So, Johannes, what kind of photography do you do? Tell me about your work. And because you've spent that time trying to figure out what you have, it helps you verbalize who you are and what you're doing. And that's such a huge part of being a photographer. It's what I was saying earlier when someone else asked the question, and I said, you could have 2 answers. You could have an answer of, I don't know. And you could have an answer of, oh, I did it because of X, Y, and Z. That's what people who are in tune with photography, when that's music to their ears, is they want some sort of purpose behind what these photographs are. And that would be a good start. It's a good challenge to try and do it. I say, give it a go. Can you comment on the Lightroom Blurb plugin versus BookWright software? I can, Burt McBride, and I will comment. So here's the thing. And this is my opinion. The Lightroom book module is pretty fantastic, because how cool is it that we're integrated actually into Adobe Lightroom? We're also integrated into Photoshop. And oh, by the way, we make the plugin for Adobe Lightroom, for Adobe InDesign to make books. That's what I use from time to time. It's the coolest thing in the world. The Lightroom book module, to me, is based on one thing and one thing only, and that is efficiency. Because your images are in the develop module and your book is in the book module and you're in the same piece of software, you don't have to leave. You can tweak a file and the file shows up in the book and the changes show up, and it's really, really slick. As a design tool, it is not as option filled as BookWright. So BookWright offers you more design choices, quicker, easier, faster, more options, more type options, more things. There's more stuff there. If you're making a portfolio, I think the Lightroom module is fantastic because your portfolios are pretty simple, not necessarily telling a story, not necessarily a lot of text. But if you're doing book work, I think you'll find BookWright is a little bit more robust in terms of what you can do. And then above BookWright is the InDesign plugin. The InDesign plugin is the most incredible thing. It's a blank canvas. It's kind of intimidating at first because you're looking at blank pages and you're like, oh, it's all up to me. But anything you can dream up, you can do in InDesign. So I would say it's InDesign, BookWright, Lightroom. But again, they all have such specific applications. And the BookWright, if you want to know about using Blurb through Lightroom, Jared Platt is the man. Jared Platt is a photographer based in Phoenix. He has done a bunch of films about using Blurb and Lightroom together, and that's Jared Platt. He's a very intelligent, very nice, accomplished photographer. His Lightroom Blurb books look better than anyone else's I've ever seen. So he is the man when it comes to using Lightroom, but that's how I would differentiate the two. And let's see here. If the book is a portfolio, how does that change your layout, if at all? So Craig, that's a great question. Portfolios are typically very simple when it comes to design because a portfolio has a different goal than a book does. A book is going to tell a story. It might have a narrative arc, a beginning, a middle, and end. A portfolio is you, Craig, putting it in front of me, Dan, and saying, this is my photography. Is it any good? And so it doesn't necessarily have to tell a story. The person viewing a portfolio, may have very limited time with them. So typically portfolio reviews are 20 minutes maximum. And that's if you're lucky. Most of the time at portfolio reviews, I would say I spend 90% of the time talking to the person and about 10% of the time looking at their work. So the portfolios are simple, big images, lots of space, let them read it. They may open it from the back. They may open it from the front. It is only your best images. That's it. So the layout is going to be probably simpler than it would be if you're making a book. Let's see. What's next? What kind of, you can ask me a question about anything because I'm the Blurb creative ambassador. I know kind of everything about everything. So the best place to park, what's the fastest land animal, all there. Do Blurb books use a color printing profile when submitted so that we can soft proof our images, get an idea of what our images will look like when printed compared to what we see on our screen? Scott, I knew someone was going to ask this. The short answer is yes. But here is my subpart B caveat to that question. There is a printing profile. You can download a profile. You can soft proof. You don't need to. You can if you want to. I don't recommend this to most people because most people are not used to soft proofing, and most people don't know how to use soft proofing. They see it and then they go, oh, I have to convert my image from that to this other thing to make it look right. And then they get mired in the rabbit hole. So if your monitor is calibrated and you're considering your monitor brightness in terms of what that will do to an image's density, then you are going to be fine. I do not use the profile and I do not soft proof, but I don't do it because the vast majority of other people don't do it. So when I show books, sometimes people will say to me, oh, your books look this good because, you're a printing expert, or you use the profile, or you get special treatment. I say, I don't get special treatment. I pay for all my books and I didn't use the profile. All I do is I calibrate my monitor. And I also keep in mind that I typically, when I'm sitting here, I have a giant window in front of me. I have the skylight you can see above my head. It's bright in here. I want it to be bright. Consequently, my monitor brightness is turned all the way up. So as you can imagine, if my monitor brightness is turned all the way up, my images might be printing a little bit dark by the time I get that book back. So I try to keep that in mind. I open up my files a little bit when I'm going into the software because I know that I've overcompensated with the brightness on my monitor. So calibrating is really the key. And you'd be amazed at how many people don't calibrate. A lot of folks are intimidated by calibrating their monitor, but let me just be the first person to tell you again, I am a solid D- in math my entire life. D-. I think the only reason I passed is the instructors did not want to see me again. And they, instead of failing me, they gave me a D-. If I can calibrate a monitor, which basically is one click of a button, you can do it too. It's a little spider that attaches to the screen, and it runs through, it calibrates, it says, hey, do you want to use this new profile? And you say yes. And then you know what you're looking at. If you've never done this before, it is worth doing. And if you're working on a laptop specifically, I can almost guarantee you when you see that new profile, you might fall out of your chair because you have probably gotten used to looking at a monitor that is nowhere near close to good calibration. The human eye will compensate for almost anything. It's an amazing tool. So calibrate, keep density in mind. The profile is there if you want it. And if you want a soft proof, you can, but I would not bother. You don't need to do it. It's I'm not saying if you're going to print inkjet prints at your house, sure. If you're going to send files to a printer, sure. But if you're using Blurb, you don't necessarily need to do that. Someone just said, Clinton just said, look, calibrating is so simple now. It even evaluates the light of the workspace and the devices are very affordable. That is exactly right. So it will take Dan's crazy bright office and, probably write me a little nasty little note saying, hey, why don't you turn the lights down? But it will compensate for all this for your calibration. It's fantastic. We're out of the dark ages. I used to have to go out on a mountaintop in a robe with a giant thing with like a piece of metal with a stone in the middle, a gem, and the sun would come down and tell me how to calibrate. All that's gone now. It's all just automated. It's fantastic. And I'm sure AI is going to make it even easier. What would you recommend for street photography book of a travel 8x10 horizontal? Is it worth the lay flat for a coffee table book? Okay, let me just go back to this, Patricia. By the way, Patricia, I like your avatar. It looks like your family on vacation in Spain, Greece, something like that. What would I recommend for a street photography book for travel? 810 horizontal. Oh, I have so many questions. Let me think about that. 810 travel is the obvious. 810 horizontal, because you're probably shooting a lot of landscape format images. That's the easy way to go. Makes sense. And if this is your first book, not a bad choice because the 8x10 isn't too expensive. So if you jump up to the 11-13, you're going to spend more money. If you haven't done it before, this could be a great way to do that. There's a couple of things. I think magazine is a really fun format. I think the easy thing to do to feel good is to do that 8x10 horizontal photo book. And again, you could do soft cover and use the ProLine eggshell or the ProLine coated paper. And that's a great combo. What I would love for you to do to advance is to also at some point do a 20-page magazine. Soft cover, there's only one paper choice, but you are now taking horizontal images and you're designing in a vertical portrait aspect ratio. This is a much, much more difficult design puzzle to solve, but it's a really good one to be able to solve. So I would do that. And the 20-page magazine, I think, is $5.99. You might pay more to ship it than you will to printing. So it's not expensive. I do this quite a lot. I don't remember. I shoot a lot of horizontal images. I don't remember the last time I did an 8x10 horizontal book. I'm always working with either square formats or portrait formats. I have made MagCloud Digest horizontal 8-page MagCloud Digests, which I love, by the way. But yeah, I think that's not a bad idea. But also too, Patricia, I see a lot of street photography stuff. That front matter and the back matter are really important. because I need to know what you're doing and why. I want to know more about you, more about the story, why you're doing street, what kind of street, lessons learned, mistakes made. I need to know because there's a lot of street photography. So I don't know about you. I need to know as much about you as I do about the work itself. So I see there's some magazine fans in the chat. I can see them. I'm not checking my email, by the way. I'm checking to make sure I'm not dropping the ball because we've had technical challenges. I can't believe any of this even works. I mean, we're all lucky here. Okay, does illustrated cover work well for a portfolio or using text can be better? If you suggest illustrated, then how to decide one for a portfolio? Oh, good question. Yeah, so I think a portfolio can go either way. If you go to your average bookstore, not a photo bookstore, but just a bookie bookstore, wordy bookstore, books with illustrated covers historically sell 80% more than books without art on the cover. So books with copy only or no art on the cover. But with portfolios, all that's kind of out the window. I think a portfolio, it's nice to have the artist name on the cover because what I mentioned before, I'll give you a little secret. I think I've talked about this before in certain calls, but here's the thing. So short answer is I like it illustration on the cover and I like the author name on the cover and I like the author name pretty sizable because when you sit down with a portfolio and you put it in front of someone, they're not necessarily looking at your portfolio. They're going to take a look at that portfolio at some point, and within about 15 seconds, they're going to figure it out whether or not you are at a level that will work for them. They're never going to say that that's what they're doing, but that's exactly what they're doing. They're going to open it up. They're going to be like, they're going to look and they're going to go, yeah, this person knows what they're doing, or this person's not there yet. The rest of the 20 minutes, they're looking at you and they're talking at you and they're looking at you and they're looking at your clothes and they're listening to your vocabulary and they're listening to how you speak about your work. And they're making all kinds of other decisions about you that are not based on your photography. They're based on you as a human being. So that cover is important because if it shows an image and more importantly, your name in giant letters, that name could be seared into their brain. So let's say that they look at your work and they know within 15 seconds, you're not quite there yet. But for 19 minutes, you guys talk about photography and you talk about why you're doing and you explain who you are and what you do. And you're dressed fairly well and you have a sense of humor and you're talking. And the client said, the person reviewing your book says, well, man, this person's not quite there yet, but they've got some potential here. And if they keep working, they might get there photographically. But you know what? I really like this person. I would love to be on a set with this person. I'd love to give this person an assignment because I want to hang out with them. This is a pretty cool person. That's where that name and that image on the front could just lock in enough for them to remember you down the line. That's why I would do it. The book that I talked about earlier, designing the new book that I'm working on. Initially, I was just going to have that classic look, black cover, white typeface, Helvetica, and it was going to have the title of the book, and that was it. And I mocked that up, and I was like, doesn't work. And so I changed the typeface. I added an image. I changed a vertical column text on the back cover. I put the title on the spine, starting to feel like something, starting to feel right. But with a portfolio, keep it simple. Let's see here. Question from Instagram. Holy cow, it's coming in from outer space. I'm starting to work on a small book project and want to block it out. How should I do this? Index cards, a big sheet of paper. What's a good approach? That's a really good question. I love that. Starting to work on a small book project. So the questions that I would fire back at you, which I'm not going to know, is it a photo project? If it's a photo project, I love printing everything small. In fact, I added an image to the presentation earlier that we weren't able to see because of the whatever tech issues we were having. And it was a picture of when I went to Japan and I came back and I edited all these images down. I printed about 50 pictures from Japan small, and then I laid them out on a big table. I also use my journal. I use my journal a lot and I will do, I don't have any because this is a new journal, but I will basically take my pen and I will draw potential spreads. I will draw out basically the aspect ratio of what I'm doing. Am I doing a portrait book or a landscape book? And then I will draw spreads. I'll put little columns and squiggly lines for text, and I'll kind of get an idea of what I'm doing. Sometimes I do this while I'm still in the field. I can remember sitting in a hotel in Buenos Aires on the way to Antarctica, and I was drawing covers, potential covers of what I thought I was going to do, not only with the images, but with the type. So I'm a big fan of analog blocking out. But if you want to do it software-wise, I use a piece of software called Milanote, Milanote, and it is a storyboarding. You can do anything. It's storyboarding, mood boards, imagery, copy, and I use it all the time. And I also use it with the woman that I co-teach with every time we do a workshop. She adds to the board, I add to the board, and we have these beautiful, massive screens full of content. So it's kind of cool. I like both. I'm an analog guy, but I certainly like that as well. Miro, somebody said Miro for layouts. Miro and Milanote are almost identical. So Miro is awesome as well. I know a bunch of people that use Miro, and I know a bunch of people that use Milanote. So I think we got time for maybe one more here. Brady, when using a photo book as a business card, what type format makes most sense? Great question. I always consider a lot of my photo books to be business cards. It's the modern business card. Here's the thing. Smaller is better, because when I assume as a business card, you are giving it away. So I love MagCloud for business cards. I love the MagCloud Digest in particular. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I think Blurb trade books. I'm a 6x9 Blurb trade book fan. That's my favorite size. It's the book I make the most, and they're so inexpensive that if I'm with somebody and they respond to it and they're like, wow, I just really love this, I'm like, keep it. Put your brand on it, put your logo, put your contact information. Don't just put your social media, put a phone number, an email, something, a website. Put a website on there that forces them to go where they can find your email. Do that if you're worried about putting your contact information out. But yes, Blurb trade books and MagCloud are both absolutely perfect for that. Let's see here. Okay, let's see. Which is a stronger pair, in your opinion, 50 and 28 or 50 and 21? I use a 50 might angle. I'm not a 21 person. The problem with 21 is that everything looks good because you frame it up and it's a 21. Your brain goes, whoa, I'm like an owl. I can see out in these directions. If you look through history at the best documentary photographers in history, the 50, 35, and 28 are dominant across the board. So I would say 50, 28 way more than 50, 21. I think that's a pretty easy answer. I only know a couple of people that shoot 21s, and I don't like that work much at all. So I could be biased. In fact, I probably am biased. So, okay. I think maybe we get one more here. Okay. I think this is the last question. I'm starting to work on a small book project and want to block it out. Oh no, we already did that one. That was a good one. More than happy to answer it again. Maybe I changed my mind since I've answered that question. I think we're winding down. I'm looking, there are so many good questions in the chat too. And I know that Michelle and Aaron and Kara behind the scenes are trying to feed them in as fast as possible, but there are so many. And here's the thing, folks. The online events that we're doing like today, minus the technical difficulties for whatever reason, these are a perpetual thing that we're going to be doing more and more. So the way I look at this is if you're new to these calls, this is just the beginning of our relationship and the beginning of our education together. So if you didn't get your question answered today, it's okay, because we will get back to it at a certain point. And we will try to answer as many as we can. And we're going to continue to come with different programming. So if you have certain topics that you are interested in, that you want to talk about, make sure you let us know. That could be photography, it could be editing, sequencing, more on design. It could be about marketing. It could be about collaboration. There's so many different topics that we can cover. So, man, thank you all for being here. And these are fun. Apologize for the technical errors. I'm kind of mystified because, yeah, the first 2 trial runs worked perfectly. It's probably my fault. I'm assuming 100% it's my fault. So you can blame me. Again, thanks for everything, and we will see you next time.